Will you ask him if he can hear me?
Ask.
Okay, I think we're live. I think we're jumping right into tonight's Tales at the Taphouse event, Love and Queerness. I want to thank you for tuning in for this special event, and I'll introduce myself. My name is Rose. I am the event coordinator, and I will be emceeing tonight. I want to welcome you all and thank you for fulfilling an incredibly important role as listeners tonight. I know most of you are familiar with the structure of our event, but things are a little bit different tonight. And some of you are tuning in for the first time. So I'll give you a quick rundown of how tonight is going to go. We are completely virtual. So all storytellers and participants are Zooming in. We are completely live, so whatever happens in this hour to an hour and a half is just going to happen. In addition to a lovely lineup of storytellers, we'll get to learn more about two local organizations, Laramie Pridefest, who we'll hear from shortly, and the Laramie Human Rights Network. We may hear from them at intermission or at the end of the event tonight. I'm super excited about these partnerships. I know our community benefits vastly from their missions and the work that they're doing in our community. Okay, so we will conclude the event with a wild card storyteller. So if any of you viewers want to put your name in to tell a story under tonight's theme, which is love and queerness, then all you need to do is send an email to talesatthetaphouse@gmail.com. You'll need to send that by intermission, so roughly half an hour, maybe 20 minutes, half an hour. In the subject, write wildcard, and in the body of the email, just include your name and your pronouns. We will randomly select the wildcard and we'll send you an email response with information on how to participate in order to tell your story. Okay. If there are any questions regarding the wildcard storyteller or any other questions, feel free to use the live chat option. Any viewers, feel free to use that live chat. It would be cool to know who is viewing in. You can state who you are, where you're viewing from. You can ask questions, give praise to the participants, just whatever you want. Okay, that is it from me for now. I'm very honored to introduce to you Tammy Schroeder. Tammy is one of the organizers for Laramie Pridefest, and we're going to hear from her now.
Hi, everybody. My name is Tammy, and I'm a board member for Laramie Pridefest. And I'm just here tonight to talk a little bit about what Pridefest is, what we do. And I'll just start off with a little about myself and why I decided to get involved. I've been in Laramie for about 2 years now, and I took a job here completely sight unseen. I'd never been to Laramie before. And I was a little nervous about moving here, quite honestly. The only thing I knew about Laramie was that it was in Wyoming, conservative red state, and that it's where Matthew Shepard was murdered when I was 18. That's it. So I came out a couple of weeks before I started my new job, just to look for housing and kind of check out the town. And it turned out to be Pridefest's second annual week of events when I came out. So I got to join the march and go to a drag show, and I just immediately felt better about my decision to move here. Hundreds of people at the march, pride flags up in businesses downtown and across the city, a full auditorium for the drag show, things like that. So last year I joined the committee. This year I became part of the board. And I just really wanted to be a part of something that made me feel so much better, so safe and secure and loved here in Laramie. And to hopefully be able to make somebody else either new to town or thinking about coming to town, or even someone who's been here for a long time and has just never had that kind of community before. The board has written up a statement that I'm going to go ahead and read to you. Bear with me, it's a little long and I'm not super great at this public speaking thing, but here we go. This has been a hard Pride month. though I'm sure that I don't have to tell you that. We've seen a global pandemic, increased and late awareness around racial justice, rolled back protections for healthcare that particularly impact trans and non-binary folks, while somehow being granted severely belated civil rights protection. We've seen a pride flag vandalized here in Laramie, and on our end have tried and struggled to do what we can to give visibility and support for the Black Lives Matter movement. As I'm sure many of you have heard through memes or conversations with your friends, we went old school for Pride this year. We're back to Stonewall and the riots against police brutality. We've really been forced to take a look at Marsha P. Johnson and Sylvia Rivera's legacies and lives in a way that we haven't had to do in a long time. Shortly after the murder of George Floyd, we wrote a statement that we need to remain accountable to, that we'd like to share with you now, because we feel that is important to the way that Laramie celebrates Pride this year. Black Lives Matter. We are in solidarity with our Black and of color LGBTQ+ Laramie residents. We are in solidarity with those mourning and protesting across the country. We have work to do, and this statement is only an expression of commitment to do the work of addressing anti-Blackness and not yet the actual action that we need. The work of including people of color, and especially Black people, is work that Laramie Pridefest should have been doing long before the killing of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Sean Reed, and Ahmaud Arbery, long before the violent deaths of Tony McDade and Nita Pop as Black trans people, long before the killing of Robbie Ramirez right here in Laramie, long before the countless acts of violence we are still unaware of. Leadership in Laramie Pridefest is 80% white, and this is a failure in one of the most diverse towns in the state. Now and always, we need to do work internally to address that and to be more intentional in the programming and the outreach that we do. We have taken the time in recent days to ask queer people of color for feedback and help in drafting this statement. And the lack of doing this work previously, we had to take additional time to do outreach, build relationships, and ensure we ask in a fair and equitable way for the labor from people of color. This stresses the importance of continuing to build further relationships with people of color in Laramie and in the state. That said, no Black or Black and queer person has had a voice in this statement, and all of those who have helped write this cannot begin to imagine the tiredness and exhaustion of Black people at this time. We have only had feedback from a lesbian Latina and one queer Latino. We are being honest about this, as the transparency is crucial towards engaging in anti-racist work. The consequences of not actively doing anti-racism work are deadly. We need to better fulfill Laramie Pridefest's mission to use an intersectional framework to honor, celebrate, and support queer Laramie residents. Queer people of color are often left in the gaps. The queer community has a long way to go when it comes to centering Black and brown, queer, and trans people of color. Laramie and Wyoming have a long way to go towards equity, and the impact of COVID-19 only stresses this. In Wyoming, as nationally, people of color are disproportionately represented in COVID-19 deaths. We remember Sylvia Rivera and Marsha P. Johnson, the trans women of color to whom we owe for Pride today. We remember that justice was not given to them while they were alive. Sylvia was homeless for a large part of her life and died in a shelter for transgender people. And Marsha's death is largely assumed to be a murder. We remember Stonewall and the 5 days of riots in response to police brutality. We remember that Laramie is land we occupy and do not rightfully own, and acknowledge our Native and Indigenous communities, including the Cheyenne, Arapaho, Shoshone, and Crow peoples, as well as additional Native tribes that call this region home. There is a pain, violence, and injustice that we cannot let go unnamed. We will remain accountable, but need more time to make sure our actions are intentional, equitable, and done alongside Black people and all queer people of color. Black Lives Matter now and always. We commit to taking action on this statement not only during Pride Month, but in the times to come. When the Pridefest committee was talking amongst ourselves long before COVID-19, the consensus behind the theme Love and Queerness was that we wanted something a bit more uplifting and happy for Pride Month. Pride is a complex mix of witness and celebration, of remembering losses and what it has taken for us to get where we are today, but yet celebrating ourselves, our community, and our identities. I cannot speak to how our storytellers will interpret this theme, but I want to remind you and me that as shitty as the world is right now, not all is lost, not all is terrible, and there is hope. We thank each and every one of you for joining us tonight. Enjoy the stories.
Thank you, Tammy. Thank you for that statement. Okay. I'm going to introduce you to the first storyteller of the night, Lindsay Hanlon. Lindsay is a writer and activist. While she currently lives in Cheyenne, Laradice will always have a piece of her heart. When she's not working, she's getting into arguments with bigots on Facebook, buying books she doesn't have time to read, and going on walks with her Cocker Spaniel, Hershey. Thanks, Lindsay.
Thanks, Rose. Names have been changed to protect both the innocent and the ignorant. I used to think that the problem was that I had bad boyfriends. From the ages of 19 to 23, I had 3 boyfriends, and they were all terrible. My first boyfriend, Kevin, in my freshman year of college, was cute and funny and an absolute dumpster fire. His top move included taking me on a date to a fraternity haunted house, and upon reaching the floor, where a shadowy figure suddenly started up a chainsaw, dropping my hand, pushing me towards the chainsaw-wielding maniac and running in the other direction. Horror movie survival skills are A. Boyfriend skills, not, needs improvement. I forgave this and a lot of other stupidity before finally breaking up with him. My second boyfriend, Mitch, was someone I met online, and that is where that should have stayed. We went on a date to the movies, and he tried the classic over-the-shoulder stretch and missed, and instead scraped his arm along my spine in the most excruciatingly awkward thing I've ever experienced. He was not used to dating women who were taller than him. We had Trevor, who broke up with me after a date while he was dropping me off from a date, and specifically at the exact moment that I was getting out of his car. I actually had to text him later to make sure that he had in fact been trying to break up with me, because he did it so weirdly that I wasn't quite sure that was the intention. Then I had a lot of single years before there was Tommy. And with Tommy, I thought I had solved all of my problems. Tommy and I met at a speed dating event at a Comic-Con, and it was one of those weird cliche movie trope type things that included me getting stuck in an elevator long enough to ensure that I went to the session that he was going to be at. He's sweet and caring, and he was interested in the same things that I was, and he was very patient with my boundaries. I was 28 years old and still a virgin, and in no real hurry to change that information. Our friends got along, our parents got along, and everything seemed to be working. Tommy was a really amazing boyfriend, and I was a not so great girlfriend. Our relationship often felt like a test that I hadn't studied for and hadn't actually known was going to happen. And it made for a lot of awkward moments. He would send me flowers after I'd had a bad day at work and get really anxious and edgy if we hadn't talked in long enough. If he was telling me about his bad day, I tried to fix the problem, which is not what you're supposed to do. And if I was busy, then I would text him a terse, "Sorry, hon, lots of work, later." And he would just do things that seemed to come naturally to him, like wrapping his arms around me while we're going to a restaurant, or remembering and celebrating our 1-month anniversary. Whereas for me, it felt like a constant necessity for a reminder. Loaf of bread, carton of milk, stick of butter, physical affection, giving my time, trying to accommodate his needs. A few months into our relationship, he told me that he loved me, and I said thank you. I was not trying to be a jerk. I had a personal rule that I wasn't going to say I love you lightly, not to anyone. But then I had a problem. How do you know when you're in love with someone? With my ex-boyfriends, I honestly never dated any of them long enough to find out, or cared enough about them to worry about that very much. I thought about all the things that I was pretty sure happened when we were in love. You want to be with them more than anyone else in the world. Touching and kissing make you feel very happy. You think about them all the time. You can't stop staring at them. You're willing to compromise on major things, and you plan for the future together. That would be a no. I love spending time with him, but I love spending time with all of my friends. I accepted and initiated kisses with some sense of fulfilling a role. We were in a relationship. People kiss during relationships. We should be kissing. I thought about him a lot, but I was also distractible by other things. I would catch him staring lovingly at me and I would smile and blush. But I was as likely to check my phone during a lull in the conversation as I was to stare adoringly at him. We compromised on a lot of things, but I was bossy and opinionated, and I got my way whenever I thought it mattered. And a future together was a big, gray someday. I balked at the idea of moving in together, and I'm pretty sure that he would have proposed to me if we hadn't had a very serious conversation about how I hate public surprise proposals. We'd watched one of those surprise proposal videos, and I turned to him and said, never do that. So that hopefully headed off a proposal at an anniversary Comic-Con. This isn't to say that I was horrible. I did eventually tell him I loved him and cared for him deeply. We had intense emotional conversations, and I took care of him when he was sick. But if a relationship is a competition, then I was losing. I blamed a lot of problems this time. Ours was a long distance relationship, and it was hard to build something together when you only got to see each other on weekends. It's hard to be passionate and romantic on a schedule. My libido is just very low. I had overly high expectations from watching movies and reading books and just taking in too much media. I was projecting a media narrative onto our relationship that was unfair. I had psyched myself out by looking at my friends and their seemingly perfect relationships and was judging myself based on snippets of something that I saw. Everything was going to be fine. Everything was not fine. Starting to explore the idea that I was asexual felt simultaneously like finally finding the key to solving a complex math problem and purposely scaring myself with apocalyptic what ifs. What if this is real? What if we have to break up? What if this isn't what I'm supposed to be doing? What if I'm wrong? Things started to make sense, but the consequences of that were immense and terrifying. But once I started, I couldn't stop. Tommy isn't stupid, and he'd realized that we weren't really progressing physically, and he approached me about it. Open communication, first sign of a good relationship, right? I shared my theory that I was asexual, but excellent student that I am, I had done my research. Asexuality is a spectrum, and I assured him that asexual people could still be physically intimate if they wanted to. If they wanted to put their partner's pleasure over their own, if they wanted to lie back and think of England. Turns out I did not want to lie back and think of England. More research happened, and I learned a lot more about aromanticism in addition to asexuality. I thought about our relationship, and I tried to pull apart what parts of my love for Tommy were different from my love for my friends or my family. And I didn't have a large pile of differences. I examined the differences that I did have and identified the things that came naturally to me or that I was an eager participant in, and the things that I did because I wanted to please him or felt like they were a mandatory part of a relationship. Well, shit. We broke up. He took it well, but we don't talk. I've been single for over a year. I'm probably going to be single for the rest of my life. I am every 1990s movie cliche about women in their early 30s. But instead of scaring me, that thought makes me pretty ecstatic. I'm really happy and I'm fulfilled. I have friends and family members and volunteer gigs and passion projects and a very stupid Cocker Spaniel. And I love all of them. I have as much love in my life as I ever did, if not more so, because I finally have more love for myself. The future isn't a hazy blur anymore. It's a long line of dinners with friends and trips to the playground with my nieces and nephew, and staying up until 3 a.m, alternating working on a project and playing The Sims. There are no problems standing in my way to finding love and happiness. There never really were problems. Okay, the bad boyfriends were probably problems. That was a bad idea. But mostly there was just me and me misunderstanding myself. And I understand myself a lot better now. I'm asexual and I'm aromantic, and my heart and my life are full of love. They're just not the kind that we usually talk about. Thanks, guys. Thanks all.
Thank you, Lindsay.
Oh, my son.
All right. Getting confirmation from our second storyteller that connection's good. Mel, thumbs up?
Thumbs up.
Okay. I'm going to introduce our second storyteller, Mel Cody. I do want to give some trigger warnings for their content, for their story content, and those warnings are for rape and sexual assault. Mel is a Pridefest board member and organizer of Laramie Kink events. They made their way to Laramie from the DC and Denver metro areas, and they are happy to live in a place without traffic. Thank you, Mel. No connection with Mel, so we're gonna work that out. And if Ammon is ready, I'm going to introduce Ammon. Okay. 1 second. Okay.
Ammon's ready.
Ammon Medina. Ammon is a mixed genre writer. He received his MFA from the University of Wyoming. He believes stories help people empathize with human beings living outside their own experience. Ammon is a first-generation immigrant. Ammon was a Norman Mailer Fellow, and his chapbook, Ragged Red Voice, won the Florence Kahn Memorial Award. His work appears in Quality Journal, Western Confluence, Black Renaissance Noir, and other places. Thank you, Ammon.
Thanks. I hate coming out stories, so I figured I'd tell a couple coming out stories tonight. I hate coming out stories because they imply some sort of fixed ending. I grew up Mormon, and it was just my mom and me most of my life. We were close. We went to church most Sundays together, and honestly, this story alone could be like a 40-minute story. So instead, you just need to know that Mormon people cling to their religion for their own identity. It's an identity that guides their actions, their beliefs, their dating prospects, and marketing choices. Like, I should be saying LDS instead of Mormon, but it was Mormon when I grew up, so I should say LDS. But I was driving with my wife at the time, and I got a call from my mom. And she was crying, and someone else had told her that I had left the church. I hadn't been going for about a year, and I still can't really let it go that my mom had to hear it from someone else. The same woman that I cooked meals for while she was working her second job to provide for us during my childhood, after turning down my offer to help pay the bills, that she had to hear from someone else that I had left. I can't quite let that unkindness go. She asked me a lot of questions I didn't want to answer, and questions I didn't have answers for. Our relationship spiraled into hurt and distance for many years after. She saw Exodus. I saw Genesis. My second coming out between my mom and I was about my divorce. I don't want to be married is not a popular opinion to tell a single mother so hurt by her first marriage being pulled out from under her. More hurt followed, and more distance. I hadn't told her. She had been calling, and on the few times I would call, she just kind of picked up through context clues that my ex and I weren't living together anymore. The hardest coming out was to myself. Coming out stories are often about angsty teens, at least on TV shows and TV series and whatever else. I was 29. I was off of a divorce and a failed relationship after a divorce, and I felt like I was too old to be coming to this realization. But as I was dating and looking around at people I could date, I just realized that I was noticing how sexy a man's toned bicep could be. Sorry, I lost my place here a little bit. I started to notice how a man's broad shoulders kind of seemed inviting, and had fantasies of snuggling up on their shoulder and kissing at someone's neck. And I just realized how right it felt when I was at the club and saw that gender non-binary person checking me out, how our beards felt when we kissed, how we had danced, how I felt him swell against my leg and how I swelled against theirs. It was hard to come out to myself. And another thing I hate so much about coming out stories are that they imply that in like one singular event, I can reconcile identity. As if it just happens once. I hate that it minimizes the number of times I've had to just take a shower and take deep breaths to stop the world from spinning. Had to repeat to myself as I worked on self-acceptance that progress is not linear. Determined that my mom finally heard something from me, but still really worried that she was just, seeing me find new ways to blow up our relationship. I eventually decided I needed to come out to her last summer. I drove up to Lander the night before and camped out and cooked Mexican food over a fire on a disco with a friend to kind of fill up my emotional bank. And took a long drive down to Orem. We went on a hike together the second day I was there to a waterfall. And as we were getting out of the car, it was really cute. My mom said, so LGBTQ, like she was like reciting it from her Google search. And she was like, are you doing that work because that's one of your identities? Which was really nice. That she just got right to the point. And, on the walk, she said, well, she doesn't really agree with it. And she needed to get that out of the way, but that her role as a mother was to love and accept her son. And she did. And we grew closer and continue to grow closer. One time I came out to a professor. I grabbed a beer with him at Tap. And when I told him, he just kind of looked at me funny. And I said, I was like, what? What's going on, Brad? And he was like, well, do you find that most people who know you aren't really surprised? Because I just kind of had figured that, which was, reassuring to someone who was newly out. Another time I came out in a Western shop. I went there to kind of play dress up with some friends as they were looking for some good outfits ahead of the Cheyenne Frontier Days. And I saw these earrings in a jewelry case. And I can't explain exactly, but I just really wanted them. It was suddenly, I was like, I would look kind of feminine and cute in those. And I looked at this little old lady who runs this Western shop, and I made a million assumptions. And I kind of realized that this could go one of two ways if I asked to try on the earrings, but I asked anyway. And when I put them on, she just told me that I looked really good in them and then tried to sell me like 3 different pair. And I think it was the best thing in the world to just be treated as a customer with money in that moment. What I hate most about coming out stories is that they imply I have any sort of control. In the best case scenarios, I can control what I share, but I can't control your reaction. Now, I'm a mixed race beauty, I'm half Ecuadorian and half white and all queer. I live somewhere between he and they on the gender spectrum, and so often I don't care your opinion or persecution, but have to experience it all the same. I once picked up a guy from the airport and was delivering him to like a political training event. And I didn't know much about him. I knew he was Latino from his last name. And so we were talking about being Latino in the car. And he said, I mean, you're pretty damn pale. And then later at the event, and I had read him as, you know, like white as well. And that was like a very mutual surprise, but I didn't quite articulate it the same way because I don't love colorism. And, you know, later at the event, he was like talking about taking PACT money, and he just like really doubled down on how, as a brown queer man, he always takes power where he can get it. When he, not where he can get it, but he takes power because no one's willing to give it. And I just kept on thinking about the gatekeeping and his colorism, how it forced me into this box of like coming out as Latino or brown, and how strange that was. And thanks to a lot of therapy and a lot of self-examination, I don't really care anymore how most other people read me. But I care if your read keeps me from renting that cute apartment I want. I care if your read keeps me from shitting where I'm most comfortable, if it keeps other people from shitting where they're most comfortable. I care if your read of any of my identities leads to my firing. I mostly just care if your read leads to violence. The thing about coming out is that I'm gonna have to come out a lot more. And many times, your perceptions will have preceded me. Thanks.
Thank you so much for sharing with us, Ammon. Very powerful. So the Laramie City Council is currently having a work session of police policies and oversight. Hopefully many of you were or are able to participate in that. One of our storytellers is at the session doing important work, and they were going to speak on behalf of the Laramie Human Rights Network during our intermission, which would be now. But instead, we're going to bump intermission to the conclusion in hopes that that meeting maybe has wrapped up and we can still hear from that representative, as well as hear their story that they've written for the Love and Queerness storytelling event. So we're still accepting wildcard submissions. You can email tales@thetaphouse@gmail.com if you want to be our wildcard storyteller at the end of the evening. But without intermission, we'll now move into our third storyteller. And I believe that is Mel Cody. Alicia. Okay, we're gonna do Alicia. Alicia Brock. Although Alicia was Bible Belt born and Midwestern raised, her heart has belonged to Colorado for the majority of her adult life. Through a midlife crisis and a new adventure in love, she has been surprised with delight to find that Wyoming just might be where her heart has belonged all along. Alicia loves that she gets to spend her days working to destigmatize mental health and bring about social reform. In her off time, she tries to consume as much of nature and ice cream as humanly possible, alongside the 2- and 4-legged loves of her life. Thank you, Alicia.
Well, I would echo what Ammon said about coming out. And this is a coming out story of sorts as well. So there are 2 coming outs that really stand out to me. And when you are queer in any way, you don't just come out once, you come out many times over and over again. But the first time was in 1999 in rural Southwest Missouri at my Southern Baptist College. I was 21 at the time, I believe. And it was in the context of an accountability partner meeting. So if you don't know what that is, in Christian world, that is where you get together with a friend once a week and you tell each other all the horrible sins you've committed over the course of the week. And then you pray for God to have mercy on each other's souls so that you will not do that horrible stuff anymore. And so in the context of that meeting, I told my friend that I was having inappropriate thoughts about women and I thought I might be gay. And her response to me was, oh, everyone does that. You're probably not gay. It's just your sin nature. Pray about it and it'll go away. And I was so thankful that I hadn't burst into flames on the spot, that I just took her advice to heart and buried those feelings deep down inside me and moved on with my life. But thoughts did pop up here and there over the course of the next several years because I did spend the majority of my 20s single and in rural Midwestern Southern Baptist life. If you were not married by the time you graduate college, you might be gay. So the second coming out was 15 years later, and that was to my husband at the time. And his response was, I was kind of wondering. So, as I reflected on that, I think the question that I get the most often is, how did you not know sooner? In fact, the first date that I went on with a woman, she really gave me a hard time about that and wanted to know how I couldn't have figured this out sooner. And I think there are a lot of reasons for that, but the main one is the story that I was told about gay people. They were mostly men. They all had AIDS. They were out having sex in the park at night. And they were all going to burn in hell and hated God and just didn't want to be straight. And that's why they were gay. And I knew that wasn't me. So how could I find something to identify with? When the only model that I had for being queer was something that was so foreign to me. And then the other thing was the only model that I had for love was a man and a woman. And I loved playing with my Barbies when I was a kid, and I had Ken and Barbie, and I had these little twins, Barbie baby twins. I loved them, and they sat in their little perfect car together and drove around to all these places. And it was one of my favorite things to do as a kid. And it seemed so perfect. And that model for love was so ingrained in me that when I actually experienced love with one of my best friends in my 20s, I had no idea what it was. It took me a long time to figure that out. And even after I came out to my then husband, it still took me several years to really reconcile and come to terms with the fact that I couldn't give him what he needed. So we tried everything. We tried having an open relationship and thought that maybe if we just got some of those needs met on the side, that we could still have a partnership. And that did not work. I apologize, my dog is here. He wants to be a part of the story. So I went through a period of thinking that maybe it was just about sex, because that was the narrative I was given growing up. It was just about people wanting to have sex because that was more fun than obeying God. And so I tried that. And one night I was sitting with a woman that I was very casually seeing while I was married to my husband. I had no feelings for her. And yet sitting there in that moment, I experienced far more intimacy with her than I had ever experienced with my husband, who I loved deeply. And it was in that moment that I knew that I couldn't give him what he needed, and he couldn't give me what I needed. And through the course of several months of conversation and a lot of pain and a lot of anguish and heartache, we finally came to the conclusion that the most loving thing that we could do for each other was to let each other go. And so we did. And through that process, I have learned a whole new definition of love. And not to say that, it's not a linear story, because I still feel the grief of not being able to fit that model that I was given. I still feel the grief of disappointing the people around me, of losing relationships, and of people thinking the worst about me without ever taking into account what I say is true for myself. But at the end of the day, I know that I love God, and I know that my love with my partner is true. That is my story.
It's quite a beautiful story. Thank you, Alicia. Thank you. We will move on to our fourth storyteller. I think Mel has a connection. I'm hoping Mel has a connection. And so I'll reintroduce Mel and remind you all that there are trigger warnings for rape and sexual assault. Okay. Mel is a Pridefest board member and organizer of the Laramie Kink events. They made their way to Laramie from the DC and metro areas, and they are happy to live in a place without traffic. Now we're going to go to Mel.
I can't think about love without thinking about trauma. I am a child. I am molested. My hands are placed where they should never be. I am so scared. I follow the script I am given. I do what I am told. In the summer between 5th and 6th grade, we move. We are in a new house and I develop breasts. I find hiding places when we move in, but by the time 6th grade starts, they no longer fit my shape. I am a child. Only one other girl has breasts like mine. People whisper that she's a slut. Someone says she has a boyfriend in college. I am 11 1/4. I do not think of myself as a child. I feel so old. I am a child. I get my first real crush on the teenage girl who runs lights for a community theater production I am in. She invites me over one day to watch Queer as Folk with her. We watch chastely for hours while I admire her shiny blonde hair. I lie and tell people later that she was my first kiss, so that I don't have to admit that my first kiss was from my molester. I am a child, a teenager. I am 15 and I have a learner's permit, and I drive my rapist home from school so that he can rape me before I go to work. I do not think of myself as a child. I do not think of what he does as rape. I don't always say no, but when I do, he ignores it or hurts me or tells me that he'll kill himself. I don't say no. I am 17. My new boyfriend and I have found the rhythm of each other. There's a position where I knit my hand into his afro and hold his hip and move him inside of me, and our bodies are so pressed together. And his scant chest hair brushes against my taut nipple. And after a while, I'm aware again. I'm in a corner, crouched. I'm holding my knees. My body is twitching sporadically. My heart is racing. I'm cold. I'm so cold. I don't see anyone. I can't call out. I can't make a sound. I know this place. I recognize my boyfriend's townhouse. I tell myself to say something, anything. Fuck, stupid. There's a gentle hand on my arm. I'm led to a futon. I sleep. We go camping together. He's never been. I bring him into Shenandoah National Park and we tuck a small tent under a tree near the eponymous river. He takes a picture of my head in the tiny window of the tent, the shadow of his body lined up where my body could be. He gets the picture developed and shows me months later. It takes me a long time to understand why I love that picture of me so much. In the tent that night, we play cards with a flashlight and he loses a shoe. I tell him that before he puts the shoe back on, he should check it. For what? Bugs. He rolls his eyes and he kisses me and we roll over onto our playing cards and they stick to our skin as I pull off my tank top, bra, shoes, socks and watch him maneuver himself around the zipper of suddenly tight jeans, and I roll over on my hands and knees and part myself for him and he comes to me. We are terrible at strip poker. The next morning, we wake up to summer heat and our bodies pushed together want to never part, the sweat binding, our skins trying to separate like peeling off hot leather, so we give in and in. In the fall, we go on a hot air balloon ride. It's a gift for him, something he's always wanted to do. We are both very into grand gestures. We're falling apart. It's hunting season in the forest below us. And I stare down at something safety orange and I see a hunter butchering a deer. There is viscera. I stare. My boyfriend and I write poetry and fight. We are 18 and we feel so old. We go to Florida together. We break up. I fuck an astrophysics PhD student while the Sword in the Stone plays in the background. He's balding and awkward and jabby, and what he's doing doesn't feel good, but I know that once a guy is turned on, it's cruel not to help him come. I stare upside down at Arthur and Merlin and a cute lady squirrel, and he groans and reaches for a tissue. I try to fuck a beautiful Mormon bodybuilder who lies down on my futon and comes as soon as I touch him. He's embarrassed, but I don't mind. We don't see each other again. I fuck a skeezy guy because we hang out and get high together and watch Cowboy Bebop and we throw little balls of lighter fluid back and forth and it doesn't burn us. After I'm stoned, a Manhattan wasp, proudly uncircumcised, shoves his dick into my mouth. He is also stoned and he pushes into the warmth of me and says I'm nice, and I hope that he will finish quickly so that I can lie down again. The faces he makes are grotesque. I flirt with a woman I meet on campus. I love her short black curls. I love her passion, her righteousness. I am terrified of her. She invites me over for spaghetti, and I get stoned, and I take the bus, and the street seems so long and dark and cold, and she meets me outside, and she brings me in. She is so warm. We don't see each other again. I'm stoned and someone is having a house party. Someone teaches me how to do a tequila shot with lime and salt. We practice. There is a keg and red Solo cups. Someone leads me back to a bedroom and I can't really see him, but I suck him off because that's what I'm for. I'm stoned and in someone's basement. It is a velvet party and I'm wearing a borrowed dress. There's beer pong. Someone has made a bar with loose boards and is serving an orange drink. A group of women pull me with them to a nearby playground. I end up on a small boat swing with a redheaded woman. She laughs mountains and I want to climb them. I'm drunk in a swimming pool and I meet a man and I throw up in his lap. I give him a blowjob in November and he gives me an abortion in March. I am sober and I meet a man in the park so that we can make music together. I want to sing and he plays guitar. He seems so nice and we work together on a punk cover of Don't Cry For Me, Argentina. One night he tells me that he's a foot fetishist and he thinks I have cute feet and he asks me to give him a foot job. I do, and he comes on my feet and I can feel his semen drying between my toes, gluing them together. At the next practice session, he wants to do it again, and I immediately sprint home. He stops answering me when I reach out to him. I throw rocks at his balcony door. We never make music again. I'm finally in therapy, and I'm claiming my queerness, my kinkiness, my life. I go to my first local BDSM event. It's at a Cold Stone Creamery. I get an ice cream cone and I sit at the table with a small group. People are talking. There's a couple of men in trench coats despite the summer heat, and some women sharing pictures of yaoi back and forth. The only woman who catches my eye is a tiny round woman with an incredible laugh. She and I become close. We talk about Shakespeare. She tells me what she likes, and I learn to have things that I like. She tells me about negotiation and what that looks like in a kink context. She tells me about wants, needs, and desires. She is openly sexual in a way that I admire, a way that doesn't seem tangled up in trauma. We shower together and I kneel down and shave her legs for her because we both have terrible eyesight. Afterwards, she talks me through working oil into her hair, avoiding her shunt. I help her slather cocoa butter on her body and she laughs as I massage it into her. I push my fingers into her pussy and press a vibrator against her clit and make her squirt. She is so soft and she loves to be bruised. She brings me to my first local play party. She arranges to have me consensually abducted. We do a photo shoot together. She brings me to kink education classes. She brings me to the first exile ball, and I'm terrified of the crowd, but we dance anyway. We kiss, and she keeps her tongue inside of her mouth and asks me to do the same. I love the guidance, the discussion, the space for preferences. She tries touching me, and I dissociate and come to in her closet, pressed into the corner. We don't talk about it. I can't. I'm in group therapy 3 times a week in 3 different groups. I'm in individual therapy once a week. We try EMDR and it tears me apart. We try medication and I'm terrified, but it helps. I keep going to kink education classes weekly at least. I meet him during a class on dominance and submission when we both question the presenter on the reductivist gendered language in the presentation. He is brilliant, a researcher at heart who chose a career that allows him to help people. When I am consumed by passion for some inanity, his freckles follow the line of his bottle glasses and crinkle around his almond eyes and soften his gaze with affection. He's proud of the hair that he's grown to his waist, and he's apple-bottomed in a way that belies the roundness of his breasts. He always says, "What?" when I look at him with hunger. And I disappoint him with wordlessness or stumble over words in a stupid attempt to please. My sensual pleasure, avoidant by necessity, disconnects me from language in the moment. So I come back to him later with scraps of poetry in hand, and I try to explain why the gentleness in his eyes fills my neglected heart. He teaches me the word compersion. He finds that feeling curled inside my chest and gives me the language to embrace it, to love seeing love in another person. He stands with me in the margins and we talk around trauma together. He's dotted with scars and he has a plan for everything. We compare breathing techniques and he shows me the thoroughness of the first aid kit he always keeps on hand. We compare illnesses, and he shows me how to be my own advocate with his advocacy. He tells me about the gift of his IUD, and he takes me to get mine. He lets me feel safe. I try to do the same, carrying a travel toothbrush with me whenever I see him so that his food allergy is not a threat, giving him more travel toothbrushes for his other partners so they similarly won't find an issue to their physical affections. He has strong preferences and he knows his limits and he is completely open about them. One of his great disappointments in life is a common thread of people who profess to understand those limits and then violate them in some way anyway. He's too honest to understand the stories that people tell themselves to justify behaving badly. And I am too ashamed to try to explain. I moved north to Laramie. I'm over 30 now, and my breasts are heavy, and I worry about so many things. I discover the dearth of kink events in Laramie, and I start to bring educators up from Denver to teach people. I become one of the hosts of a dungeon. I help people find their happy, sexy places. I get to teach hundreds of people about informed, enthusiastic consent and how sexy that can be. I have a million different sounds of arousal, pain, and pleasure carved into the wrinkles of my brain. We create a beautiful community together where people support each other, where trans and queer people are accepted as they are. And we fight every day to keep predators out. We talk so much about safety, about how things go wrong. We talk about safe calls and missing stairs. I hold people while they cry, while so many people in so many different ways say, I'm sure they didn't mean to, or I think he was joking, or please don't be too hard on her. I think she just has a lot to learn. Part of my life now is gathering the pieces of these people up and holding them in my arms while I tell them it's not their fault. I get to do what no one did for me, and it is an honor every time. Thank you. And I just want to say that I protest the racist mass incarceration that is carried out partially in the name of survivors. Black Lives Matter.
Thank you so much for sharing that story with us, Mel. I want to thank all the storytellers that shared with us this evening. And I'll inform the viewers that Javon Garcia, who's our intermission and our final storyteller, we're going to hear from Javon at a later time. We think it's just the timing, it will be more powerful, but I'm going to introduce him anyway. And then just stay in tune to our social media to see kind of what, to hear his story, as well as we'll do a little Q&A session with Javon as well. So just a little bit about Javon. Javon is one of the organizers for the Laramie Human Rights Network. That network is a political organization marching for justice. They are a resource for donations, demonstration updates, and education. You can find them, I believe their Instagram handle is Laramie Humans. So you can find them on Instagram, as well as I do believe they have a Facebook page. So a lot of great, important work is going on right now, and you can stay up to date and support and work alongside of that organization. And the information is out there for you. So a little bit about Javon. Javon is originally from Cheyenne, Wyoming, but currently resides in Laramie. He is a rising senior at the University of Wyoming, studying economics and environmental and natural resources. As an openly gay, Black male, pride and the associated history have always been a considerable part of his identity and his growth in accepting himself. He now works through multiple organizations to help ensure that those who find themselves disadvantaged due to their identity or other societal restrictions have the resources and platform to share their perspectives and struggles, with the hope it will bring solace and recognition to those voices that have been unheard throughout history. So just know the reason why we're going to postpone hearing from Javon is because he's doing the work that I just read to you in his bio. Okay, so I'm going to double check to make sure if we have any wildcard submissions, and if we don't, then surprise, I think I'm going to be your wild card. So you might hate it, you might love it, but yeah, we just confirmed that no wildcard submissions, but actually there is one. I'm going to read you a story, my story. So maybe before I do, I will give my final conclusion, because I just don't know how I'm going to feel after I share my story. Oh, Tammy, we are going to end with you with the update of the other events that are going on for Pridefest this week. So when I'm done, Tammy, that will be your cue to go on. So in conclusion, I want to thank all the storytellers once again and thank the strong leaders we have in this city. I see so much beauty in the unique humans that make up our community. And I do strongly believe that we are a powerful vessel for change when we come together while acknowledging individualities and intersectionalities. Thank you, leaders of Pridefest. Thank you, leaders of the Laramie Human Rights Network. Thank you, leaders of Alamany County for proper policing. And thank you to all members and all supporters of those organizations. Okay, that's my conclusion. So I'm going to roll into my story, okay? The first time I questioned my sexuality was the first time my sexuality was questioned. During the normal 20-mile commute from town, my dad suddenly pulls over to the side of the road, but he never takes his eyes off of it. Without so much as a glance or tilted head in my direction, he asks me if I am a lesbian. I am 15. My first thought is, am I? I had been given the label tomboy during my preteen years, you know those years, the period when it's no longer socially acceptable for girls to play like boys, act like boys, or dress like boys. My family mostly tolerated this stage of my life, though my brother was embarrassed of me wearing his hand-me-downs, and my mom diligently tried everything she could to get me into a skirt or a dress for church every Sunday. My parents weren't completely unaccepting of my look and my behavior, but they heavily pushed gender norms onto myself, my twin sister, and my two brothers. I shed a lot of tears during those years, not understanding why I couldn't wear what I wanted to wear or act the way I wanted to act, but I never thought I couldn't love who I wanted to love, but that's because I hadn't been in love yet. Am I a lesbian? Elizabeth's butt looks good in spandex. If Mary wants to kiss me, I would kiss her back. I'm tired of dating high school boys. I know I'm not going to marry any of them. On the side of Wingville Road, beside an uneasy father, I decide those things don't make a person a lesbian. For my observations, I'm pretty sure you have to have a girlfriend to be a lesbian and maybe have an eyebrow piercing. I don't have either. I blurt out nervously and all too quickly, no, Dad, I'm not a lesbian. Nothing really changes for me after that conversation on the side of the road. I still eagerly attend youth group where I'm taught being gay isn't a sin, but acting on it is. I don't know the term bisexual or asexual or pansexual when I am 15. I'm not told I have options. So I decide. I won't tell Elizabeth her butt looks good in spandex. I won't kiss Mary back if she kisses me. I'll just tell the boys at school that I'm in love with God, so I don't have to be their girlfriend. Years pass and I successfully avoid being asked by others and asking myself about being gay. To be clear, this isn't a coming out story. I wish it was. Instead, this is a story about questioning. I wish my response to my father's question was a question of my own instead of thinking I had to answer yes or no. I spend those passing years not knowing how to be interesting to women. Instead, I learn only how to be interesting to men, and I think I get pretty good at it. I successfully marry a man. When he hangs a calendar on the wall to display the recorded tally marks he's kept to represent the frequency or infrequency of our sexual intercourse, I 100% think there is something wrong with me. I am made to feel I'm withholding something from him, something he wants, something that is owed to him, something I owe him. Ephesians 5:22. Wives, submit to your own husbands as to the Lord, for the Lord is the head of the wife, even as Christ is the head of the church, his body, and is himself its Savior. Now, as the church submits to Christ, so also wives should submit in everything to their husbands. I successfully divorced my husband. I still don't try to appeal to women as much as they appeal to me, and I don't think they will find me beautiful the way men do. All this time, I tell myself my attraction towards women means I am purely about this thing called shine theory, and that I'm just naturally a pretty good feminist. I think our society's over-sexualization of the female body is the reason I find women's bodies sexy. I'm now in my 30s. I drive a friend home after a Tales at the Taphouse storytelling event. The theme is how we met. I don't tell my friend this, but I'm disappointed there are no stories about homosexual relationships. In my imagination, I write a story to share under that theme, but it's a story that hasn't happened to me yet. A story that may never happen. The friend I am dropping off has also been through a divorce. He recently came out as pansexual. His openness gave me some courage, so before he gets out of the car, I blurt out how I think I must be bi. I reveal how I was on Bumble for a hot second and selected the option romantically interested in men and women, but that I delete my account for 2 reasons. Reason number 1, I think I need to figure out if I am into women before I date someone. I feel it would be unfair to the person I am dating for me to still be figuring things out. I wouldn't want to lead them on. I wouldn't want them to feel I'm experimenting with them. The LGBTQIA plus community in Laramie seems so confident and to have found themselves at such early ages. I am 34, still wavering. Reason number 2, I see a man I know on Bumble, a man who harassed me while at work in attempts to persuade me to go on a date with him. My no thank you, I'm not interested, was not enough to deter him in his mission, nor was a known fact that I was in a monogamous relationship. I didn't want him to see that I was now single and to allow a door to open to greater degree of harassment from him. So ladies, though single, I'm not on Bumble. My friend's advice to me is beautiful. He reminds me that others have never given me the opportunity to explore my sexuality, nor have I given that opportunity to myself. He says it's not only okay to be questioning, but it's something to celebrate, and encourages me to go on dates with women. He gets out of the car and I remain there, sitting in truth, letting his words sink in, and hesitantly, I feel gay. I rub my eyes and my fingers touch the ring at my brow. I've just only gotten the piercing 2 weeks prior. I think to myself, I've got the eyebrow ring. Now I just need a girlfriend. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. This is the part of the evening where I ask, beg, and plead for you to please get involved and help us with Laramie Pridefest. We could really use your help. Extroverts, please, 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 so that I and the other introverts no longer have to get up in front of groups of people, including virtually, to do this. No, seriously though, in all reality, we can use your help. We need your help to remain accountable to our statement of solidarity of Black Lives Matter, as well as our commitment to including queer people of color. Send us an email or a message on Facebook, or find us on Instagram if you want to join. Now more than ever, we could use your support and we need your voices. We do have some other events coming up this week. Pay attention to our Facebook and Instagram accounts for those. We're trying to be really flexible with times, just as things come up in this weird world that we're living in right now. But you can look forward to Pride Story Hour on Wednesday, Cooking with Queers on Thursday. We have some performances scheduled for Friday. And we're doing an alternative parade at 2 separate times on Saturday. We also have a Twitch channel that you can check out. Finally, I and the rest of the board would like to thank Rose, whose support and care has made this all possible. And like really, really thank Rose from the bottom of our hearts. We couldn't have done this without you, and we thank you. And that's all from me. Thank you, everybody who tuned in tonight. We appreciate you.